Welcome back.
Hello, hello, and welcome to almost episode 450. Not quite.
Yes. The first thing we were going to mention is was the after action report with Mike Hildebrand, but we and he forgot that Baltimore was happening on the day we were recording it, so we had to push it back
because we tried to have Baltimore moved. They wouldn't move the dates. So inconsiderate, right? I
said, "Don't you know who we are?" They didn't do it though. But you know, once this thing is scheduled, we'll have it on the interwebs, which I think if anybody's listening to this, you know, we are everywhere on the interwebs right now. We have an unbelievable team of social media assassins. But yeah, good stuff is coming. It was smooth and refined. Lots of new stuff coming. HMAF.pro. Go check it out.
Yep. I was going to say we had a little bit of a hiccup in Battery Destroyers 3 where we're going to be we're pushed off a little on that. So Battery Destroyers 4 in September might become Battery Destroyers 3, not to confuse anybody, but that's going to be actual cars. We're going to be lighting some cars on fire. So that should be great.
Very exciting. And then tomorrow I travel to the Utah Governors Conference. So we are recording this a little bit early so I can be there. And then I think the next few, actually, there is a new one I have to talk about offline, is we just got invited to another one in October. So we have Continuing Challenge in September. We have Virginia in September. It's possible for the Pennsylvania in August. And then we just got invited to Hot Zone in October.
The Hot Zone?
The Hot Zone, the illustrious and benevolent Hot Zone.
The one that we've been banned from for 9 years.
Yeah, so I'm interested. So
interesting.
So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But these times are a changing, so we'll see.
The times are changing, and you know, as times change, so do the seasons. And as we enter the seasons of especially the Northeast, right, where we definitely go from, you know, a little bit chilly to all of a sudden it's 110 degrees out and 400% humidity. People in our areas and in many areas are starting to open up and enjoy their pools. So we thought we would have a little bit of fun with some pool chemistry. Yes.
Yeah, this is actually was something that was dropped in our ear at the happy hour, which is a premium level thing. You can jump in and we have like a kind of a mind trust. Everybody grabs a cocktail and just starts speaking. And one of the gents that was on the call says, "Man, it would be great if you guys could do one on pool chemistry and pool chemicals." So
done.
As a budding, chemist as I may be, I take my pool chemistry very seriously, and I do it a la carte. I do it very uniquely. So we're going to divide this into 2 episodes. We have one episode purely on the pool chemicals and emergency responses and what's going to come out. And then the second one we're going to be doing for the pool owners, telling you how to really dial in your pool, and I mean, like, chef's kiss right on the button.
Well, all right. So like we sit and we talk, and I was talking with somebody and said, "Oh, we're going to be doing, you know, pool stuff." And they're like, what could possibly be involved with pools, right? Like it's a pool and you throw a little bit of chlorine in there and you're done. But in actuality, like, pools can have a tremendous amount of chemicals to them. And depending on whether you're dealing with like somebody's personal pool or a public pool, you know, you can have, you know, home strength chemicals, or you could have industrial chemicals, and they land in all different categories, right? You have your sanitizers, you have your algicides. Of course, each one of those messes with the pH, so you have a whole set of chemicals off to the side to help adjust the pH. And then in case that swings too much, we have stabilizers, we have oxidizers. Nobody wants to swim in a cloudy pool, so there's clarifiers, and you know, there's things to help reduce the flocculants. That's such a weird word. There's all sorts of special stuff. So, you know, in and of themselves, they're not that bad. When we usually arrive on scene is when people start to kind of mix this stuff. So understanding what the potential chemicals are to a scene that you could be responding to is going to overall help us to be able to resource the call, figure out what chemicals are involved, and ultimately the byproducts and how we're going to deal with this.
Yeah. So let's start with the sanitizers, because arguably these are probably, I'm going to say, the most common things that people think of, like, oh, this is what I need for my pool. And it is a in order for you to have a nice, clean, clear blue pool, you need a bunch of different little targets to be hit. And the goalposts are, I'm going to say, relatively wide. All right. One of the things that we do is we have to sanitize it. You have to make it clean and clear, which you start with I'm going to say the vast majority of places use chlorine-based sanitizers. Okay. And like Mike was saying, these can go anything from the cute, adorable home grade all the way up to legitimate chlorine ton containers for like municipal pools or bigger.
I'm shocked that you don't have a 1 ton sitting in your backyard for your pool.
How do you know I don't?
Because I was there filming with an alligator, if you remember correctly.
That's true. Yeah. Well, it's behind the bushes. But usually what people use is like the calcium hypochlorite, which is just bleach. Sodium hypochlorite, right, which is, again, another form of bleach. And then you got these two other ones, which are different. We're going to talk about this more in the second one, is trichloro isocyanuric acid or dichloro isocyanuric acid, which is usually in the slang, they call it trichlor and dichlor.
Okay. I've never heard of these, so I'm interested to find out how they react and what they do. The reactions and the byproducts of these, right? When we're responding to many of these emergencies, many times it's because we have mixed chemicals together, as I said before. So a lot of these things are going to have, not that they're going to release the same thing, but they could have similar effects in that reaction chain. So, for example, if I were to mix something like muriatic acid with any one of these, they're pretty much going to be releasing chlorine gas, which is going to be toxic and cause those kind of respiratory distresses. Mixing it with ammonia is going to form your chloramines and also be really, really bad to the respiratory health, which, by the way, if you want other ways of releasing chloramines, if you take bleach and put it and fill up the urinal in anybody's firehouse, when they pee ammonia and those two mix. So we are definitely suggesting not to do that because you can cause some serious damage by that.
I would agree. As somebody that has been the recipient of that, it is quite pungent. It stings the nostrils.
But chlorine-based stuff isn't the only, sanitizer out there, right?
No, a much smaller slice of the pie is the bromines, right? And if you kind of notice that these are all the halogens, right? They're aggressive elements, and so you can have sodium bromide, bromine tablets like bromochloro dimethyl hydantian. I don't know if I spelled that right.
Like
dimethyl hydantian. Yeah, I might have spelled that right.
That can't be a chemical name. I've never seen another chemical name ending in TOIN.
Maybe I spelled it wrong. I probably sneezed in the middle of typing it.
This is a little typo. All right. So what do these bromide-based chemicals react with? Well, when we mix them with chlorine, we can create bromine chloride, which is a heavy-duty respiratory irritant. If we mix them with gases, we can create bromine gas, which is not only really, really irritant to your lungs, mainly because it's a corrosive, so it's going to eat away the insides, but it's extremely toxic as well.
Right. So let's get out of the sanitizers. Let's get into algicides. Okay. And these are typically when you first open your pool up, you're going to have that green algae sludge kind of stuff. And these might have blooms in extremely hot weather, large downpours, whatever it might be. Or, geez, you had all the neighborhood kids in your pool and they kind of destroyed the pool. You could, so things like copper sulfate, like quaternary ammonium compounds, like quaternarium compounds. All right. And what we can have by mixing these or having reactions is if, let's say you have an algicide plus chlorine, it's generally safe, but at high concentrations, it can increase your copper levels, which leads to staining and potential health issues now. Okay. Because again, these are heavy metals that are in the water you're swimming in, and everybody kind of sucks in a little bit of it. Whatever. But if you mix it with an oxidizer, which we're going to get into in a little bit, you can release some significant toxic compounds.
So in an example like this, if we very rarely respond to the pool that somebody was like, oh, I put too much bleach in the pool, right? Generally, we respond to where a chemical is directly mixed with a chemical. So in this case, the algicide really becomes a major health risk when it's mixed with an oxidizer because of that toxic compound gas. Right. So things responding in to think about, like when you're going in to do your recon, what are the different potentials of things that could have mixed together? And what do I want to protect myself against the most? Obviously, most of the time we've talked about, we do our recon, we're in bunker gear and SCBA. But we want to make sure that we also have our meters with us. So in understanding what these different compounds are that can be produced, we could start to gear ourselves to the proper meters to make sure that before we know what chemicals are mixed, we are protecting our skin and ourselves from what we're walking into. So understanding these allows us to be able to be a little bit more prepared.
I do want to add one more thing to this, because what you just said there, the response pattern of this, I will say, as somebody that owns a pool, because I'm very fancy, is that I will say typically you do not get a lot of responses to home pools. You get responses to commercial pools. Yeah. And I'm going to say this because I'm going to say typically homeowners don't use liquid. They usually use some type of solid format, which is a way easier thing to do. And second off, it's outside. Homeowners don't have inside pools. They have outside pools. When we respond in the fire department, emergency service, whatever it is, typically you're going to like a hotel or an inside thing where ventilation's limited at best, and people are easily overcome because ventilation profiles, HVAC, et cetera, et cetera. You take some of these gases and build them up in a room with no to limited ventilation, people are dropping.
Right. Yeah. And that doesn't mean to say that you can't respond to the homeowner. We've definitely responded to individuals. One of the ones that pops out the most in my head is a guy who left the chlorine lid off of the bucket. A little bit of water got in there. It is to a degree water reactive when you have that ratio, that small ratio of water to that much, chlorine tablets. Again, chlorine is not the right word. I know that, but I'm going to say it anyway. And there was a reaction that produced a tremendous amount of off-gassing and pressurization, and it blew out the drum. So we can have these, but like Bob said, they're generally, nobody's getting hurt. If you just let the chemical reaction run itself out in the open, nothing bad is going to happen. It is when we're inside that we want to worry about these things. All right. So algicides, bromines, chlorines, all these things have their own pH levels, and you don't want to be swimming in something that's too acidic or too basic. So you have to then add stuff to the water to adjust the pH. Not only that, but a lot of the chemistries of these things, the pH actually helps trigger the chemical reaction that does what it is that we're looking for these things to do. So we have a myriad of pH adjusters, right? We have muriatic acid, which is basically hydrochloric acid kind of toned down a little. Sodium carbonate or soda ash, sodium bisulfate, which is a dry acid, and sodium hydroxide. Now, I don't know, Bob, are you putting sodium hydroxide in your pool, or is this where we start to say industrial versus home?
What I use, and again, you'll hear about this in the next episode, is I use borax. Borax powder is pure sodium, it's pure base. And so you don't get the deflections and the other things. Like when you're saying muriatic acid, sodium carbonate, sodium bisulfate, and sodium hydroxide, the two outside ones, the muriatic acid and the sodium hydroxide or the borax, is the pures. The soda ash and the dry acid actually have a stabilizer built into them.
So what are they, that helps? Are you stabilizing pH, or are we stabilizing other chemicals in the pool?
You're doing pH, but you're also moving another level. You're changing your stabilizer level, which we'll get to that in the second episode. But
so that's in the future.
Right. So those four things will move pH, but those two outside ones, the first and the fourth one, don't move anything but pH. The other two will move other things with it.
So from a chemist, when you say stabilize, are you saying like a buffer? Like it acts as a buffer?
Literally, that's the word. It protects it. The UV rays break down chlorine in solution. And so if you have a buffer solution, isocyanuric acid, you will have a protection from that, which means the chlorine will last for weeks as opposed to hours.
Okay.
So that's why people usually combo up things, that trichlor, dichlor. They put it in because it has stabilizer built into it, which protects the chlorine you're putting in, which gives you a longer lasting luster.
Gotcha. Huh. See, it helps to have a pool. So what would happen if we were to mix some of these? Well, these pH adjusters are going to act like any other acid and base combination. There's some things that acids and bases play nicely with. There's some things that you're going to have horrific chemical reactions to. If we were to take and mix an acid and a base, we're going to neutralize those pHs, assuming that they're at the same pH level and the same concentration. There will be a neutralization reaction, and just like when we neutralize out in the field, we are going to be left with a salt water solution. All that nasty chemical breaks down to basically salt and water. The biggest issue that we tend to see with neutralization, especially if it's being done like on accident, where you're pouring a large amount into one or the other, is there's a tremendous exothermic reaction that occurs at the same time. And if enough heat and energy is released, you can cause a massive splattering effect. So you could actually arrive on scene to somebody who's being burnt by both an acid and a base at the same time, because you have this energetic kind of boil over happen right in front of them. So just kind of some things to think about. If I were to mix muriatic acid with hypochlorite, I'm going to produce chlorine gas, which is actually kind of one of the reasons why we put the two together in the pool to begin with. But that's for later on.
And just to call that out, the two in the middle that I said that have those stabilizers, those are the ones we usually use on the street to do neutralization. Dry acid and soda ash are our plus, or acid and our base. That's how we really do it. So
you mean I've been overshooting my neutralization every time, and it has stabilizer in it?
Voila! Look at that.
Who the hell gave me a microphone?
Now, stabilizers are kind of a very docile thing. As I said before, the stabilizers or cyanuric acid are just something to protect the chlorine in solution, the free chlorine and whatnot, from the UV's rays, the sun's rays. And so even if you mix it with chlorine, it's generally safe. It's used to stabilize the chlorine. And even at high levels can reduce the chlorine's efficiency, which requires more chlorine for the same effect. Basically, what you're going to find out is that there is really no way to remove this stuff from solution. You just kind of got to drain the pool.
Oh, so once it's there, it's there forever.
The sun breaks it down. That's the only thing that does it.
So, in your opinion, if I had some issue with a stabilizer, a lot of times we turn around and we say, "Hey, let's just dump it in the pool." Right? Let's just take this huge, 10,000 gallon reservoir, and we'll dump a couple of, pints of chlorine or whatever. Do you think there's any harm in doing that with stabilizers? Should we be pulling back from using the pool as a sink source for stabilizers like we would chlorine?
From a safety standpoint, it's not a big deal. I mean, you can go swimming and everything. It's just from a chemistry standpoint, you're never going to get that pool back into balance.
Okay, it throws it off.
It's just going to be way too much.
The next type of thing that you can find in a pool area is one of my favorite topics is oxidizers, right? The main chemical when we talk about oxidizers is going to be potassium monopersulfate, which is basically non-chlorine shock, right? So anytime you go to the store and you've got an algae bloom and you want to kill everything going off, you're going to go with a non-chlorine shock. It's going to kill most of the stuff. For the most part, this stuff is actually pretty safe. It's going to enhance oxidation properties, all right? And since it is an oxidizer, some of the things that we want to be careful is mixing it with the things that we know oxidizers don't play well with, which are going to be organic materials, okay? There are quite a number of pool chemicals. In fact, when we do our oxidizer demonstrations, we take pool oxidizers and we mix it with certain fuels, and that generates reactions within 2 to 3 minutes. We have stuff on fire. So be careful with what if you personally have a pool, with what you store in your pool shed, and keep in mind that if people have a pool shed, they could quite often be the catch-all for any kind of product that they have, right? So brake fluid could be in there, transmission fluid could be in there, gasoline could be stored in there. So be careful as you're moving around that you don't want to accidentally knock over and mix these things, and understand that you could be responding to an incident where these oxidizers and fuels have already mixed, and it is literally a ticking time bomb where you're going to have very little chance to react to a sudden fire.
These next two are they're really kind of, from an emergency standpoint, they're not a big deal. But clarifiers and flocculants, you might see aluminum sulfate or polymers. What these things kind of do is they take the haze out of a pool. Clarifies and the word flocculant means I'm going to take a bunch of little floaty things and get them to stick together, which means they got a lot heavier, and that way they fall to the ground. Right. So if you've ever used like that new drywall, that dust clumping sandy type thing, that uses more of a static charge where all those dustings will click together, and then because it has more weight, it falls to the bottom. This is a liquid version of that, and so you can basically throw it into something that has like a haze. But if you're using clarifiers and flocculants, it's usually because something uphill of this thing has not been balanced. This is like we're getting to the end of the balancing chart here.
Okay. So is this the same type of material that's used in cesspool treatment places where they're trying to drop stuff out of solution? Same kind of concept?
Yeah. And we use it in brewing of beer. You want to take the yeast out of suspension. You put a flocculant or a clarifier in there, and it just drops it. It's clear in about a day.
So some of the other things that you can come across, some of the more specialized stuff are enzymes and metal. I don't know what that is. Metal sequestrants? What the hell
sequestrants,
is sequestrants? What the hell is a metal sequestrant?
When you have too much copper, you have too much magnesium, you have too much zinc.
Those stabilizers that we added in before, we're going to pull some of those heavy metals out.
Yeah, because if you have like a concrete side, it'll actually go into the grout lines and stuff like that, and this will kind of stop that.
No real hazard here when mixed with other things, so you're probably not even going to be called to it. It's usually pretty safe, but you can reduce its efficiency by mixing it with some chlorine. So nothing toxic, nothing coming off, nothing that we have to worry about as far as responding is concerned.
So let's just summarize about how things can go wrong for us in the emergency responses. If you haven't noticed, most of this stuff's up in the front of the list, right? We're talking about these chlorine gases and bromine gases, arguably are probably the worst thing. So you can get the chlorine gas when you're taking chlorine-based sanitizers and mixing them with acids or ammonia. That would cause a toxic cloud and cause some respiratory issues. And if you're, we're in the fire service, we would have on our SCBA, it could still, just on a side note, it can still react with your skin, because if it turns back into a liquid via your sweat, can become we'll say an etchant, a skin etchant, right? And if you have bromine gas, it can be released from bromine-based sanitizers when they're mixed with acids, causing that, again, respiratory and corrosive damage on the skin. Not something you want.
Yeah, the chloramates are also formed in the reaction of chlorine with ammonia, causing respiratory distress, irritations, strong smells, heat and splattering, right? We talked about those exothermic reactions happening. Halogenated organics can be produced when oxidizers react with organic material. These can be potentially harmful as well. We talked before a little bit about the home versus the industrial, and why Bob had said the liquids are there. And don't take pool runs for granted. We've had guys that they had to be put out to pasture, so to speak, on these runs, because they take for granted. They're like, oh, it's a pool chemical, who cares? And some guys have taken hits because their mask came off. They weren't thinking. They didn't put their mask on. And these are just people that we've worked with. So don't take the pool runs lightly. Please make sure that you're doing everything you can to protect yourself at all times, no matter what.